Welcome back to another episode of Beyond the Sermon with Hyde Park United Methodist Church in Tampa, Florida. I'm Matt Hotho, the Director of Production and Online Engagement.
And I'm Sally Campbell-Evans, the Pastor for Congregational Care.
So Sally, you just finished preaching a sermon that kicked off our series, Well-Rounded, about the teachings of John Wesley. And this week, appropriately, it was on education. And you just had one verse that you talked out of, Proverbs. And as we'll find in our wisdom series that we're going to do later this year, Proverbs are pithy. They're short. They're if this, then that. So if you raise your child in the way, they will not stray from it. How's that worked out for you?
Depends on the day.
Okay, deal. Agreed.
Yeah. I mean, it's not a formula. It's not a guarantee.
Okay.
It's an ideal that we work to. If you train them up in the way you want them to go, things will be grafted onto them. Things will bind into their heart and lives. And I really do believe that. But children grow up and have their own autonomy and make decisions on their own. So it's an important goal for us to teach wisdom in the lives of our children, but it's not a formulaic guarantee. It's not a mathematical this.
Yeah, I think sometimes, and maybe some of you have experienced this as well in your own lives, where you feel pressure from your parents almost to behave a certain way or to have a certain outlook, and you're just wired differently. I'm noticing that in my three boys, that like they each have this internal world that I call it, that as they've gotten older, that world has gotten shaped more and is more invisible to me, right? They have their own value systems and things that they're creating in their own head. And hopefully it's been shaped and formed by what we've taught them, but it's probably not going to look like exactly what we've taught them.
No, because think of the culture is so different now than it was when you grew up, when your grandparents grew up. I mean, so we're teaching from what we know and believe and trust. We're laying that into our children when they're young, but even as they're young adults, even as we're older, we're also imparting that knowledge. But it's not a guarantee that they're going to own it themselves the way you want them to.
Yeah. So I think we have an opportunity here because we're literally a generation apart, right? My kids, I'm still kind of pouring into them, and you're getting to see kind of now as your kids are, late 20s, early 30s and, starting their own families. How have you seen that play out on the long range of your experience with your kids?
As I've thought about this sermon and thought about how I see it being acted, I see the great Christian education that happens here with our families. Sometimes I think, did I do enough? I wish I'd done a little more of this. But when I look at the whole arc of it all, I'm pretty proud of where the kids ended up. I mean, they all have a deep sense of faith, even if they don't express it the same way that I do. I'm very happy that they have something. As we, going through, we're both preachers. So they had to go to church. I mean, they had to go to Wednesday night. They had to, they were there, they were present, and they had made great friends there. And so that was all positive.
Yeah. So one thing you were telling me about before we started recording was this 10 hands thing that you did with your kids. Tell me about that, because I think that's one way that is, as I've gotten to know you and Clark, is distinct to who you and Clark are and how you use that to shape in your kids something that was of value to you guys.
That's true. So, we were living in Tallahassee. The kids were maybe middle school. Abby might have been high school. And some conversation came up about putting our faith into practice. And so we just had this long conversation as a family, and we came up with this idea of 10 hands. There are 5 of us. We have 10 hands. And so we talked about the environment. We talked about mission. We talked about mission trips, all of it. So we made a little family covenant. And so we partnered up, and 2 of us would look around the house and say, what can we do to help the environment? We change all our light bulbs to LED. We can reseal the doors so that the air doesn't, there were different things that we could do practically in the house. Then we could serve in the community. So we all had to go serve at a soup kitchen together, 10 hands serving a meal at a soup kitchen. And then we made that summer a mission trip to Guatemala. And so we went to language school. Now, let me tell you, my middle school boys, one of them particularly was like, let me get this straight. We're taking 5 hours a class one-on-one with a teacher in Spanish for summer. This is summer.
Yeah.
Yes. But everybody had their own tutor. We did language school. Abby and I lived in one house with the family. The boys lived in another. They'd come to our house in the morning, pick us up. We'd walk to school. And then, so we had homestay. So we got to know the culture a little bit. And then the second, when we graduated on Friday night, then we did some traveling in Guatemala as a family. But that was more exposure than mission. But it turned out, because we had worked in mission in Miami, all three of the kids after that grew up, and all three did a year of mission service after college. So I guess that did get grafted into them, that idea of service.
Yeah. I love that story, because I think you've got the opportunity right now of seeing the long road in some ways, right? I'm sitting here sometimes on some Sundays going, oh my gosh, is this the year that Jackson, who's 8, decides that he wants to try a piece of technology, right? Wants to try learning lights or learning sound or running a camera, right? That's the thing that I'm kind of waiting for, would be like my little grafting into him. And then with my stepsons, it's just like, guys, anything you get interested in that is halfway related to what I'm interested in is just icing on the cake, man. But it's just cool to see who they're becoming. So it's nice to hear your story from further down the road of kind of what it looks like. And I'm wondering if anybody listening to this or studying this in a small group has stories of their own, of how their kids have been shaped by them, or kind of broken away from them, but broken away from them in a way that also kind of connects with something that maybe is within us too, a little rebellious spirit, or a thing that wants to, do something a little bit different. So I'm going to shift the conversation a little bit now to something that is distinct to who you are. And we always bring props when we do Beyond the Sermon together. So if you're watching this online, you can see the notebooks that we have in front of us. If you're on podcast, there are a couple of notebooks and pamphlets in front of us as well. But one thing that you talked about in the sermon was the idea that knowledge shouldn't be scary. Learning more shouldn't be scary. In a healthy faith tradition, the idea of exploring and expanding your boundaries is not something to be feared, but it's something to be celebrated.
Absolutely. It's a gift.
Yeah.
God gave us these minds to use.
Yeah. So then tell me about Chautauqua, what you were at this summer. Yeah.
So ironically, I was a Christian ed major, and I learned all about the Sunday school movement and all. So then this summer, I got a scholarship. A church member suggested I apply for this scholarship, and I got it to go spend a week at Chautauqua. I'd been wanting to do this for years, and I got this scholarship. So off we go. And all I could think about is that early, when I learned more about the background of Chautauqua, that John Wesley was very involved in the Sunday school movement, making sure poor kids, rich kids, all kids had an education. It really seems like Chautauqua's founders listened to what John Wesley had said 100 years earlier. And they really it's a school it was originally started for Sunday school teachers to learn about the arts and literature and science, so they could be better equipped to teach Bible stories to the kids. So that's how it all started out. So then I was just fascinated by that when I got there, but I was blown away with what I learned as a woman in her 60s who is getting to see 70 and 80-year-olds just wanting to learn more. And college students, they had an awesome program for college students to come and then sit with intergenerational afternoon conversations to ask about, let's talk about that morning lecture and have conversations back about what. Anyway, it was just the whole morning. You could literally go from, one day I went to 4 worship services in one day. Ecumenical, a church in the wild. It was really cool.
Yeah.
Let me just show you if you want to.
Sure. Yeah. We were looking at this the other night.
Yeah. So this is just 1 week. This is just the Saturday events, the Sunday events. There's stuff to do all day long, and they're really cool things. So we underlined, courageous conversations on death and dying because of my role in congregational care. I sat in on that to see how do they teach it differently than the way John Dermoy and I teach it. And so that it was, just anything you think of, arts and literature is great. For you
listening on podcast, what Sally has right now is basically a ledger-sized sheet of paper, front to back, covered in classes and schedules for things that you could do at Chautauqua. I joked with her, it was like a cruise ship for faith education kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And then it goes for 9 weeks of the summer. So there's a different theme every week with we had Harry Connick Jr. Sing one night. Alison Krauss was the week before. The Indigo Girls were coming up after.
Wow, okay.
So it just varied, really varied, folks.
So, and you were telling me that the person who leads kind of the main plenaries every day is a different speaker each week. And that week it was Michael Chan, who actually is a friend of the pod in the sense of he was on our Bible Project 2020 podcast talking about Jeremiah. So if you actually go back and listen to our episode on Jeremiah, the prophet Jeremiah, Michael Chan is the guest expert for that week, which was super cool. Yeah. But tell me one or two takeaways from Chautauqua.
Yeah. Well, Michael Chan being one, every morning we started with him, and he was really good, bringing in Old Testament prophets. And the theme was, this particular week's theme was what to expect in the 2026 elections. So he kind of looked back historically at Israel, or what were the prophets trying to say in the Old Testament. And one thing that stuck with me was a forgetful nation is a fragile nation.
A forgetful nation is a fragile nation.
Meaning we need to know and own our history lest we forget it and become weak. So he then gave us, through Micah, was one text he gave us. I have to pull out the exact notes, but it was a kind of a walk through it. We can't deny the history that we have. We need to own it and then do better.
Okay.
So it wasn't like, okay, well, there's nothing we can do about that. We need to own it and ask forgiveness and move on and say, okay, we're better than this. So to not forget our past, whatever parts of it we are trying to gloss over.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
A forgetful nation is a fragile nation. And then finally, there was the benediction you said also that just kind of stuck with you from the week.
And this is going to, I think, become my tagline on my emails. But towards the end of the week, we had an an ecumenical communion service. So United Methodist, Presbyterian, Disciples, Lutheran, and UCC. I think they were all there. Anyway, it was beautiful. And at the very end, the benediction was, as we go forth, let us remember that the world is too dangerous for anything but truth. And it is too small for anything but love. And when we think about the whole world, that is so true. We need to be truthful, all of us, in our storytelling with one another and in our relationships. And we need to be more loving in all of it.
Yeah, 100%. Well, Sally, thanks so much for reflecting on Chautauqua with us and with the online audience. And so if you guys have any stories about meaningful church conferences you've been to or opportunities you've had to learn about deepening your faith, broadening your faith, we'd love to hear about that in the comments or discuss it with your small group as well as you're looking at this content. Sally, thanks so much for being with us for Beyond the Sermon.
You bet.
And pleasure. You can join us next week for another Beyond the Sermon where we talk with Pastor Justin LaRosa about John Wesley and health. So we'll see you then. Bye.